Hello everyone, welcome to Kinorama. My name is George. Today I'm going to be reviewing and breaking down the Kagemusha Criterion Blu-ray. I'll talk about the film itself, the special features, and finally give my verdict on if it's worth it. Kagemusha is a 1980 Jideki, directed by legendary filmmaker Akira Kurosawa. The film marked a revival of interest in the director, as the 70s were a very difficult period for him. He only released 2 films and struggled to find finances or studios willing to work with him. Kurosawa, despite having proven himself by making some of the greatest films of all time, was considered a has-been by studio heads at the time. This deeply affected him on a personal level, and he became depressed, going as far as to attempt suicide. I wouldn't be surprised if he started believing what people were telling him, that he was a has-been and no longer the great master that he once was. It wasn't until American filmmakers George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola managed to get 20th Century Fox to help Toho with the budget that this film stood a chance of being produced. Now, for any American viewers, you might already own this, but us Brits are playing catch-up with you guys, and we only got this in March. In fact, this is only the second Kurosawa film to be released here, the first being Dreams. Please give us High and Low. So, as you can imagine, I was ecstatic when they finally announced another one was on its way. But did it live up to my expectations? Well, to start, let's look at the film itself. I mentioned earlier how this film sort of acted as a revival for Kurosawa, ushering in a new age of success in his life. And after watching the film, I can see why. This for me stands high with some of his classics like Ikiru and Rashomon. The story follows a thief who is hired to act as a powerful warlord. When Shingen, the warlord, passes away, the thief must continue to impersonate him in order to avoid suspicion of his death. And that's where the film gets its title from. Kagemusha literally translates to shadow warrior, and in political terms that refers to a decoy. So while that concept already piques my interest, there's obviously so much more going on. I mean, the film is 3 hours after all. Kurosawa takes an interesting concept and fleshes it out into a story of humanity and power. There's also some really humorous moments too, as the Kagemusha adjusts to his new life, and when he learns he can actually exert power. Tatsuya Nakadai is on top form yet again. It seems every time I see him I'm just blown away. He's such a great performer. Here he plays 2 characters, the warlord and the Kagemusha, and he manages to add distinct differences despite them looking identical. Visually, Kurosawa takes command of some rich colours that absolutely pop. This is especially present in the dream sequence, which looks brilliant and feels so otherworldly. Probably my favourite aspect of the film is the human element. This thief has been granted a second lease of life, and to see him realise this in the connections that he forms is really quite beautiful. I particularly found his relationship with his grandson to be really touching. So the film on its own is something I would definitely recommend. But how does this particular Blu-ray complement the film? Well, I'm happy to say that there's a lot of special features included here. First up, let's have a look at Lucas, Coppola and Kurosawa. This is a 19-minute interview with George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola, where they discuss the experiences with Kurosawa and how Kagemusha came about. These interviews are conducted separately, so you don't see Lucas and Coppola together, which is a bit of a shame. But what they're saying is still quite interesting. They both clearly have a deep love and respect for Kurosawa, which is really wholesome to see.
They're showing Seven Samurai, you've got to go see this, you've got to go see this. So I went in and saw Seven Samurai and was just completely blown away by it. It really had a huge influence on my life in terms of seeing something that brilliant and something that emotional and at the same time so exotic.
They're talking from the points of view of a friend, but also a fan as well. And on top of that, I just love this filmmaker camaraderie that's on display here. There's this mutual understanding between the directors, and it's just really cool to see, especially when they talk about relating to the same things just because they are directors. This interview is definitely a worthy addition to the Blu-ray, with some really fascinating insights into the production of the film and how Lucas and Coppola felt about it. I was really surprised to hear Coppola talk about recasting the part of the Kagemusha. For context, originally the film was supposed to star Shintaro Katsu from the Zatoichi franchise, but him and Kurosawa clashed a lot, so Nakadai was brought on instead. And without straight up saying it, Coppola heavily implies that he preferred the original casting, which I thought was really honest and surprising, and it adds a lot to the interview in terms of making it feel more genuine. Up next is a 41-minute documentary, which is part of the It's Wonderful to Create series. This is a series of documentaries detailing most of Kurosawa's films. Not all the episodes of this have been released with English subtitles, so whenever one comes out, it's a really special occasion. This might be my favourite inclusion on the disc. I mean, I'm a sucker for behind-the-scenes content and how a film was produced and the details and all that stuff. It tells on-set stories from people who were there, from Nakadai breaking his ribs after falling off a horse to the firing of Katsu, which happened on the first day of filming. And wow, what a story that is. So apparently after it happened, Kurosawa came back into the room, sat down, and just said, "Katsu is relieved of his position." Whew, could you imagine the chills everyone got as soon as he said that? It feels like something from a mob movie, and it just really paints Kurosawa in this really interesting light that I hadn't really seen before. You know, he's a director who knows what he wants and he's sure of himself, so fair enough. On top of that too though, we do see how resourceful he was as a director. Whenever there was an issue on set, he would think of a way around it. And overall, this documentary is just a brilliant addition, and I'm sure whether you're interested in how the film was made or to see Kurosawa's process, that you will enjoy this too. The next special feature is Image Kurosawa's Continuity. This is about 44 minutes long and it shows Kurosawa's storyboards chronologically, with the audio from those scenes included too. It is, in a way, a shorter version of the film told through still images instead of moving ones. This was really interesting to watch as it shows how true to the storyboards Kurosawa was able to keep. His beautiful hand-painted storyboards are a huge focus for his Criterion release, which I'll get into more when I talk about the booklet. I would say it's best to watch this one as soon as you can after watching the main film, and I know that's a lot of time to commit, but it's just so you can compare it in your head more easy. Okay, so maybe the strangest inclusion on the disc is a collection of some Torii whiskey commercials made on the set of the film. And if that sounds familiar to you, it's because it's the same whiskey brand that Bill Murray promotes in Lost in Translation, which is why I have this tote bag hanging up here.
For relaxing times, make it Suntory time.
I mean, it's like a really unexpected addition, but it documents some of the on-set filming, and even Francis Ford Coppola appears in them. I think it's really cool, to be honest, and admittedly a bit of a novelty. But it's fun to see Kurosawa appearing in something like an advert, for example. And rounding out the special features is a gallery of the storyboards, as well as the usual trailers and teasers that are always found on Criterion releases. I think it's always interesting to see how these films were initially marketed to audiences, so I'm always happy to see their inclusion. And that sums up the contents of the disc. And as you can see, it's a really strong lineup of content and features that I think complement and elevate the film. Great insight is provided into the making of the film, and hearing other filmmakers discuss the film is especially rewarding. But with this being a Criterion release, we are of course treated to a booklet too, so let's have a look at that. So, let's have a look at the packaging then. Now, I think the artwork for this is gorgeous. Unsurprisingly, Kurosawa actually painted this himself, and I love the starkness of the black, which matches many of the shots from the film. The silhouette of the Kagemusha implies that he's not really who he is, merely a shadow of someone else. And the small dash of red on the horse and in the title suggests that underlying theme of power and violence. Of course, that would be represented in the final scene of the film. There's a spine there, as well as the back. When we open it, we see the same image on the disc there, and the booklet, which I think is such a brilliant addition. Usually we just treat it to the essay, but this one actually has an essay and an interview with Kurosawa. Before I go into that though, I just want to gush over how gorgeously presented this booklet is. Each page features one of the amazing storyboards that Kurosawa painted before the film, and it just adds this artistic layer that makes it feel really special. Let's get a good look at that. Each painting is so good, and you really get to appreciate each brushstroke. It's clear that Criterion really wanted to capitalise on these great paintings, and I can't blame them. Kurosawa was a great painter and had painted for most of his life, so by highlighting this it shows how skilled he was in another art form that wasn't directing. And this is something discussed in the essay provided too, which is titled Kagemusha from Painting to Film Pageantry. Written by Peter Grilli, an expert in Japanese society and culture and acquaintance of the late Kurosawa, the essay is more about the production of the film rather than the film itself. And while I would have appreciated an interpretation or exploration of the film's themes, the essay does graciously provide additional information on the film, from conception to filming. I think walking away from this Criterion, I feel like an expert on how this film was made, because they provide so much information on the production. And following on from the essay is an interview with Kurosawa. Now, along with the documentary, this might be my favourite inclusion. Interviews with filmmakers are like gold dust to me, and the ones with Kurosawa even more so. Kurosawa talks about his process a lot, and it's so fascinating, and he even weighs in on the firing of Katsu. He opens up about the history of the topic of the film too, which is really informative. It shows his artistic license in regards to real life events. Kurosawa also briefly touches on his bitterness at the film industry, which is great for showing how dissatisfied artists were at the time. He relates it to how TV affected what audiences wanted from films, and says ultimately studios were too defensive, adding that now was the time to take the offence. I just love that, this late into his career, Kurosawa still had the fiery ambition of his youth. He understands the art form perfectly, and hearing him speak about it really cements that. So there we have it. Do I recommend this overall? If you couldn't tell already, then absolutely I do. This is the type of release that Criterion nails so perfectly. Great film? Check. Special features that build on the film? Check. Brilliant art direction? Check. It's got it all. This is the Kurosawa release we've deserved for so long in the UK, and I hope they've got plenty more down the pipeline. So what do you think? Have you seen the film? Have you bought the Blu-ray? Let me know. What do you think of it? And also tell me, which Kurosawa film would you like to see get the Criterion treatment next? For me, it's High and Low in the UK. I need that. Thanks so much for watching, guys. As always, like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.